Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Marketing Hops, where we share pints and perspectives on all things in the B2B sales and marketing landscape. Let's have a cheers and dive in. Today, I am excited to spend this episode with Manny, the former head of marketing from companies that you know and have probably heard of, like Ghostery, ConveyIQ, Stencil, Sonar Security, Eureka Security, which got acquired by Tenable, and more. Manny, thanks so much for being on the show. What'd you bring to sip on today? I know we're doing this a little bit earlier in the day than our normal
Sure.
afternoon happy hour.
I got my water. I just got off the elliptical, which is what I do every morning. So I'm a big water drinker throughout the day.
Nice, the good old H2O. To stay on theme, I went with Sparkle hops from a favorite brewery of mine down in Oregon, Pelican Brewery, but it's just hop water as we go through that, but pretty good stuff. Thanks so much for being on the show, and cheers.
Catch me later in the day, and you'll see me with a nice glass of ginger ale.
Sounds good. The question is, do you do the spicy like ginger beer, or do you do like what is it, Schweppes, I think is the other one?
More the latter, but I have tried the other one. But yeah, it's literally the only soda I drink. I do not have Coke. I don't have Pepsi. If you see me out in a bar or in an event or a dinner, you will always see me with a ginger ale. It's kind of a funny.
Everything. What would you kind of say are your majors and minors in marketing?
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to answer that, I would say it comes from like how you got into marketing. You know, an unknown fact that a lot of people are surprised to know is I spent about, let's say, 6 years as a developer. So I was building websites and, front end and back end coding, kind of taught myself to do it. And I was running an agency doing that. And I learned when I started building websites that I was able to do advertisements and stuff back in the day. And I got a huge rush out of converting and having revenue come in the door. So that leads me to my superpower being demand gen. So the minute I saw something I would put on the website convert, whether that was an ad, whether that was a webinar, whether that was whatever that is, convert into revenue, I got this huge, like, the hairs on the back of my neck would stand up. And this is why I got out of developing. Yeah, I got out of development because it was a thing. So I would say, first and foremost is demand gen. Over the last 10 years or so, just being in very technical spaces, you mentioned some of the companies like Sunry and Eureka being in cyber. Ghostery was in the privacy space. My very first head of marketing job was a company called LogicWorks. It's about 12, 13 years ago. It was in the IT, right? So it was kind of a technical space. So I had to quickly get my product marketing chops in, because now you're taking very engineer speak and trying to translate it to CTOs, to CISOs, and that sort of stuff. And it just can't be a style, this pile of features that is all technical. So I had to quickly 1A product marketing. So I would say 1, demand gen, 1A is product marketing. I would say the minors, I have to manage brand. I have to manage things like Marcoux, PRER. But I wouldn't say I'm a leader in any of those things. You got to just know enough about it to be able to do the job and then hire around those parts. But like, I have not worked at a branding agency, and I have not been a head of comms or working in terms of PRER. Put me on a phone with Gardner, I will move the needle, but like, that is not my primary skill set.
Yeah, I think I'd say mine are quite similar in that vein, although I started in product marketing and then grew into demand to measure my effectiveness on that side of it. But yeah, I've always, I have opinions on art and design, but also at the same time, I am not an artist. My daughter makes fun of my drawings and she's 5. So you got that going for it. So across our careers, like as we start to progress, right, we get more and more senior. How did you know that you're ready to be a marketing leader and to lead this challenge? Did you fall into it? And what was the biggest change or challenge that you saw kind of come up in that?
Yeah, this would be going back. So I was at a large company, and you'll see after the large company, I kind of been doing different stages of startups. I was at a large company called GLG. I was kind of like head of markups there and doing email and, doing transitions from At the time, we were at Sugar going into Salesforce, and then we were implementing Eloqua 10, which was the first version of the version with the campaign canvas and all that.
Back.
Before
Geez.
that, it was awful, like that first version. But like, after I was in that job, I quickly learned that when I was having to present to the company and having to, coach folks in that way, that just kind of the leadership aspect was something I really appreciated. And obviously before that, for years, I'd had my own agency where I ran, I had like 20 consultants prior to 2008, where I was doing all of that all the time. So that was just something that was kind of inside of me. But around 2012, I got my first head of marketing job. And that's when I really, really had to do it, and do it at a level where you're now sitting in board meetings, you're going out and raising money. Mm-hmm. And, and my first board was not a VC, it was PE. So it's just a different level of conversation. And you said the challenges that I quickly had to learn to get out of the weeds and to be able to explain what we're doing to a board and not go into the details that they don't care about. The first meeting I remembered very vividly, I started going into things like search. And then finally afterwards, I was thinking to myself, like, they don't really care about that. It's literally X dollars in, Y dollars out. This is the plan for the next 3 quarters. This is why we're doing it. This is where I need your help. And this is literally how we did. And this is the short-term vision and the long-term vision. That is kind of what you needed to do in these board meetings. I'm sure you know this, but I didn't know. I was going in there and going into details of everything. And then afterwards, I was like, wow, I really got to adjust this. And ever since then, I would say it turned into a strength. Like, I feel very comfortable in board meetings because I now understand, and I have over the last decade plus, what to do there. But that first one, that's one that I still dream about. I still wake up in the middle of the night and I remember being in that meeting, like, what are you talking about?
The strategy I've employed in those board meetings is like, you have those basics, but then you have the appendix, and the appendix has all the nuance and details, so that it's like show your work and have the work be available. But the other thing, like if you're doing anything with public companies, anything that you share with the board, they actually have to consume. And I made that mistake one time when I was at a company, and we did this super in-depth competitive market research analysis report, and we sent them the whole thing with kind of an executive summary and all that kind of stuff. But because we had sent them the whole thing, they had to read hundreds of pages of like research and all this kind of stuff because they were obligated to. And so it was just one of those interesting lessons learned too on the other side. It's like, have the details, be able to show your work. Depending on your board situation, sometimes if you send it, they have to read it. Other times an appendix is just that, it's an appendix. So definitely lessons learned on both sides there.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And that evolves over time. I've also learned to be a better storyteller in these meetings as well, rather than just reading slides, which is what most people do. The other challenge I would say, and this was one that was very tricky for me, when you're one of the people in the company versus a leader in the company, I had to quickly learn that things are just different. Your team is in Slack channels talking about you and things that you are doing. And you just can't be the same as you were as if you were just one of the team. That was a very weird adjustment to me, because I was always like, I'm a pretty laid back person. I would hang out with the team. We would do this thing. And I realized over time, like, they're acting differently if I'm in the room. At least a little bit, to depending on the person, a lot. And it didn't occur to me like, oh, wow, just imagine your CEO was hanging out with us. It would be a little bit different. You're going to be laid back, but you're probably going to hold back on some things that you would have typically said. And it was a real adjustment that I had to recognize that I am not just one of the people in the room anymore, that I am a leader, and that just keep that in mind when people are acting that way. That was a very weird adjustment, especially on like work trips, especially on offsites and stuff, where I just noticed that change as well.
That was the thing, is I became a leader. Like I drew some hard lines and stuff, especially on work trips. It was like at 10 p.m., like I was done.
Nothing good ever happens after 10 p.m.
That's afraid. I will tell my team, they're like, stick around. I'm like, nope. I was like, I don't want to have to, I want you all to be able to go have fun. And I don't want to have to, be there and have to then deal with or do something because I observe something. So everybody's adults. You want to protect the company, but you have an obligation to, if you witness it, to do certain things. And so, yeah, nothing good happens after 10 p.m. So it's always better just to let them, to your point, right? Their behavior will change. So let them do what they're going to do. Right. You've got company policies and all that kind of stuff that they're expected to live up to, but you don't need to be present for it. And usually you're prepping for something anyway at that level.
With the one exception, if you and I are at a conference that's in Vegas, you will see me at the tables until 2, 3 in the morning. That's kind of when I was at Stencil, like we would do all these MarTech conferences in Vegas, and literally the CEO Noah and I, we would go to the tables, and he was kind of amazed that like at 3 in the morning, I'm still playing blackjack and poker. It's just that would be the one exception. I have to still do that.
I might need your table support there. I have not, probably the hundreds of times I've been to Vegas. I think I have played once and was not particularly successful. So next time we're both in Vegas, we might have to make that happen.
Absolutely.
So we talked about challenges is a little bit there, but the landscape is shifting so much right now for marketers. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing ahead, both for marketers, but then also for companies in context of marketing?
Yeah, obviously the economy, the tech economy, and all those changes. People have the rules have changed. Grow at all costs. You don't hear that as much. They still want you to grow, but you got to do it in a more efficient way. I don't think we're going to get to the point where it's like, well, let's not grow. I mean, some companies are doing that, but it's kind of like being a lot more efficient. So that's the biggest change that I'm seeing. And in the terms of like CMO on the marketing side, there's a lot more scrutiny on how you're doing it versus just get us the number.
Right.
And I'm finding that sometimes companies are a little more gun shy to try stuff. I'm also seeing that if you're not growing at this crazy rate, that it's kind of okay if you're doing it in the right way. That's just not how I grew up. It was more like, we 3x'd, why haven't we 8x'd? Like, this is what I'm used to, but that conversation isn't like that anymore. It's more like, well, we 3x, but did we 3x with the right amount of burn? And are we doing this in a efficient way? And if we're not, then let's 2x it in an efficient way versus 3x in the crazy way. It's just such a different conversation that I'm seeing. And just every decision and a bigger decision is scrutinized a little bit more heavy. So that includes hires. That includes sponsoring things. That includes just overall investment and stuff. You kind of have to like go agile and do a little bit at a time and prove it out before it goes, as opposed to like, oh, we have a little bit of traction. Let's pour the fire and pour alcohol on the fire and let's go. I'm just not seeing that today.
Yeah, it's definitely. I heard the concept of kind of the rule of 40, and I think for marketers, you should learn what these things mean because they're being talked about in your executive boardrooms and things like that, and it impacts your budget. But more recently, I was hearing the rule of X seems to be more popular with startups and things like that in terms of like your growth rates, your burn rates. And you're actually willing, they're putting some level of weighting on your growth rate to kind of give it more credit, because I think they saw the rule of 40 was potentially a little bit of a stall out for kind of the startup culture. So it's definitely gonna be something to watch. But do you have any thoughts on those two? I know we think of those ahead of time, and they're a little bit more finance driven. But
I mean, I see that. I don't think it's just startups either. I mean, it's a little bit different in larger companies, but they're also doing these same things. If you think about a big company versus small, obviously things move a lot slower in a larger company, but they still are dealing with the same issues. If you're not justifying and being efficient, divisions are getting cut. This is why every day we see all of this stuff happening in larger companies as well, where you and I grew up in this space. You kind of go to larger companies to kind of park, and it's kind of safe. It's kind of one of those things. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I do think, the rules have changed across all of those things. And if you're not measuring this stuff, if you're not being efficient, if you're not thinking about the long term, you're going to get eaten alive no matter where you are right now. And I think the biggest like specific example that I can think of is I'm seeing more companies spend on a little bit more of larger initiatives like brand, because they understand that the high, customer acquisition cost model where you're, let's get everything tomorrow, that's just not going to fly anymore. It's just not going to get through the board level. So whether you're in a big company or small, like you still have pressure to deliver soon, but I'm seeing a lot more companies spend more time on things like influencer and employee, in the brand of the executives and the bigger plays than I did 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's kind of great, actually, in a way that they are investing in that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
In companies I work with now, it's kind of crazy. I bring that up and it's not just pushed to the back burner. You know what? Just go fill our pipeline today. It's like, I bring it up and they're like, sure, we should do this. So that is one positive. I will say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's been an interesting shift in the dynamic around, even in the world of intent data, right? We almost went so far indexed on like pipeline now and only focusing on those in market at any given time. You need plays for those, but at the same time, you need ways and plays to bring people along. You're rarely going to generate true demand. Like yesterday, this wasn't on the company's radar, to today, they're ready to buy. Right. It's very often going to be a journey of, you've got to educate, you've got to bring them along, you've got to build trust, you've got to be top of mind. And especially in the tech world and in the agency world, it's really just interesting, is having a reputation and what people say about you when you're not in the room is so important, because we're both part of a private CMO group, and people go and ask, hey, I'm looking for a solution to this. And people will make their recommendations, and people will tear up some of those recommendations. Say, I actually had the opposite experience in that. And that, more often than not, forms the short list of technologies a lot of those CMOs go look at then with their teams. And it's the same way with agencies. It's the same way with other vendors and providers, is that brand reputation, which I think kind of it also pushes out into not just writing content and having your executives post, but also like your customer experience. It really coming back to the forefront of, how are we setting them up for success? Because if our customers are raving fans, that's going to carry us out into the market in a much different way and impact our brand far more than, a billboard or brand refresh. As you go through that, like your brand, and at least the way I define brand is, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Not in the room. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think a lot of the content I'm seeing takes that view, but it goes a little bit too far, because in the end, there's not a company I meet where they're not like, we have a top of the funnel pipeline problem. I have yet to meet one, whether they're at 0 revenue or 200 million ARR. I still hear that same thing. So it's kind of finding that middle ground and finding a way to do both. I mean, I would say the one thing you were talking about, nobody is not thinking about buying, right now, and then they see you and then now they're thinking of buying. I would say that's always somewhat been the case. Obviously, with free flowing money 2-3 years ago, it was a lot easier to move things along. But I think the change here is it's not only on our side, but it's on their side. So they become aware of you as a company or what you're trying to do. You go in a process with them. And what I'm finding in this tech economy, they may need you now, but 2 quarters from now, their priorities just have changed because of this tech economy. And that was not the case 2 years ago. And it's like, so you got to like rapidly get on my radar and make a huge business case so I can get in there, because if the longer the sales cycle goes, the more things are going to change on my part as a buyer. And that's something that is new. I have not seen that in the last 10 years. I can't tell you, working with enterprise company, enterprise solutions, how many deals are lost just because we're in a 6 to 9 month, and then just there's change in the organization. It's deprioritization. The people are no longer there. That is
lose
just
your
something
champion,
that's unique.
right?
Yes, that happens a lot now.
Yeah. It's put a lot more emphasis onto that need to multi-thread. Also, it's just like, you can't have a singular champion in the org, because either people are getting cut or they're moving on, and it is a constant shift and swirl. And so you've got to have multiple champions to carry you forward, and ideally in different departments, because to your comment earlier, like entire departments are getting cut at times.
It's funny you bring up the multi-thread. I was having a conversation about this yesterday. I was building a new type of comp plan for an SDR team that I work with. And I kind of changed it. So part of the comp plan that I changed is that when they get inbounds, that I actually throw kickers for them to get 2 or 3 or 4 people onto that call. So if John Smith comes in on inbound, I'm incentivizing the SDR to call them, qualify it, but now to get a second and third person onto that call to multi-thread. And they're going to make double, triple the comp. But as a company, it protects us, because if that one person is moved or changed, I'm actually changing the way that I do this. I hadn't done this before, but I literally built this yesterday and for an SDR team, because I said, the chances of us winning the deal go up exponentially when we have multi-threaded. So that is the new way to do this.
Yeah. I was having this conversation last week, very similarly to this end, where it was like a thing I've done is like, I call it out and up. I'm like, great, have your first meeting with the lead that came in to fill out the thing. The most sellers I've run across passively multi-thread the app. As this person asked to bring in more people, they will, let them add on, and that's how they kind of tend to multi-thread, not necessarily proactively. Some sellers do that a lot better. So it puts a lot on the SDR, and good modern SDRs on that. And I like to comp them on what I call out and up. So get me a different department involved that's a key stakeholder that we know in our buying committee, or get us a more senior person. And you can use that anchor meeting to start to do that as you go, like, hey, connected with so-and-so, here's the recording of the call, a couple key notes, like, would love to get your perspective on this, right? And like, you're now using that as part of that motion, but the compensation has to drive the behavior. Like, it has to be meaningful, because at the end of the day, I never blame, especially SDRs and BDRs, I never blame them for trying to get to their number the fastest, easiest way possible, because they have a hard job. And so
it's my very first job ever, actually, was cold calling.
Oh, so you can relate. Yeah.
It's hard.
I got lucky. My first job was selling diamonds on the phone, which was actually easier than being an SDR, surprisingly.
So it wasn't really SDR. I was a legal assistant in a law firm, and I had to call looking for prospective clients. It wasn't like injury, that type of thing, but talk about people hanging up on you, man.
Yeah. So I've grown to have a great respect for that function and whatnot. And it's like, hey, yeah, if it's like, 15% if you get an extra person or something, it's like, that doesn't retire their quota. That's not going to be meaningful. So they'll take it if it's a slam dunk and easy to do. But if it's like, hey, like, you need to get X number of meetings, and if you have this initial one, and then you can go out and up, each of those counts towards your quota, that's meaningful. And or to your comment, right? Like, hey, like, surround this, like, make the kicker enough that it's substantial, and then you'll drive that behavior.
It kind of works in, because I don't do the straight meeting thing. I'm splitting comp between meeting and discovery, which is a qualified ICP level conversation, and then the stage after that, which could be known as another thing in organizations. And a lot of SDRs are like, okay, you're going to split the comp, but I lower the number. I also do the multi-thread, because the conversion from that first to second, when you do these things, it's just higher.
Much higher.
It's easier to achieve. SDR gets paid. From an AE point of view, I'm giving you qualified ops. That's all you want, right? You don't want a bunch of meetings that go nowhere. So if I give you less, but they're qualified, and that, there's real use cases with multi-thread in there, that's just a better, I guess, scored meeting or graded meeting. And then obviously throwing in a kicker for closed one, because the way this works is, now I'm not compensating you for just getting meetings. I'm compensating an SDR for getting the quality that ends up closing, and then they make a lot more money.
Right.
And if the company's closing, they don't like, if the company doesn't like that, then I don't know if I want to be working with them, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree on that one. So I want to shift gears a little bit, because you have such an incredible background working with startups and many sized companies. And this one might be a little bit spicy for us here, but the CMO's interaction with CEOs and founders. You've had a lot of experience in and around this. And how do you manage that relationship? How do you not be a yes person in that scenario and actually give the advice that, our craft, we've spent years learning it, all this experience. How do we do that? So what advice do you have on managing that interaction and really having that impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's never perfect. A lot of it is a two-way street, right? It's on the relationship, and the relationship between the CMO and the founder, or the founder does the CMO and CEO, depending on if they're the founder or not. That's the most important one. Obviously, the one with your CRO head of sales is also up there, but that first one is critical, because when you go into a company, if you don't see eye to eye on stuff, you're never going to be able to like push initiatives across like large ones, like messaging, positioning, that sort of stuff, where you need the founder CEO to be involved. So it starts in that process in the initial meetings, making sure that you both see eye to eye. So how I like to do it's kind of like three things. Now let's call it like a three-legged stool. On the first leg, it's have the CEO, she or he, and the CMO that let's just agree on what the goals are and what like the resources are, and let's make sure we're on the same page there. And if we agree on that, now let me do my job. And I always communicate that. So our job here is to agree on what the goals of growth or whatever it is for the company are. Let's agree on the resources that I believe we need and that it matches what you think we can have. As long as we're within ballpark of each other, then that's a good place to start. Now, your part of the deal, it's almost like an SLA, is that you let me run. My part of the deal is every week or two, I'm going to show you where we're doing against that goal. And I'm not going to let it miss and then tell you, I don't know why we missed. We are going to see every month, every 2 weeks, like this is where we should be. This is how we're doing against it. If I don't communicate that to you, that is on me, then ride me, micromanage me, whatever it is. But as long as I'm doing that and I'm not straying us from the path, then your job is to clear obstacles out of my way. Don't start adding to it. And I'm going to get into how that works in a second. So that's the first. The second one that I like to do is a way I've been doing this since 2015. I have a very specific way I do one-on-ones with folks. It's like a document I use. So it's basically here are discussion items, but at the beginning and end are action items for myself and the CEO. And I assign stuff in the Google Doc. You know, Jeff is going to do this by this day. Manny is going to do this by this day. And then I move them up to the front. Next time we have a one-on-one, I go right to like, you didn't do this. I didn't do this. So it helps everyone be a little bit more accountable. And it also opens the line of communication. Like it avoids the like Slack messages like, can you do this? Can you do that? It's like, it's kind of getting it a little bit more streamlined.
Yeah.
The third leg of the stool, which is the most important, is I call this my rule of 10. This is coming from a development background, and I do this. I've been doing this for, I want to say 6 years now. I built a list kind of like agile of marketing priorities, the high level stuff. And I have top 10 things on the list. And I do this with everyone on my team. And I do this up with the CEO. I t-shirt size and I the level of effort. And then I also put in there priority level, right? So obviously if you're extra large t-shirting stuff that has low priority, it shouldn't be in your list anyway. And then I have the line. There's a big line at the 10, and then I have a backlog of stuff. And the way that I work with that, with the founder CEO, is these are the 10 priorities for the team. If you want to add something to this, something's coming out, and let's discuss that. I treat it like it's like a developer, like a release. You can't just shove things in there and get it out the door in time. So it's like, so I also do that across the company. So CRO, if you want to add, here's 3 of the things you have in my top 10. Which one of these can you wait on? And it opens the line of communication. And it's kind of like an engineering mindset. And a lot of CEOs, founders I work for in these technical spaces come from product or from engineering. They get it. And they understand that, you know, it was something I learned years ago when I would sit with a founder CEO and they would say, well, we need to prioritize. And then they would throw 20 things that were priority 0. It's like, well, if they're all top priority, you can't prioritize. The thing with 10 really does help. And where that also helps with the people on your team is it kind of just aligns it all. And it also helps with the people on your team to manage with people asking them, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? It just helps it across the board. I have found by doing that, being open about communications and where we are and just setting up that's what helps that relationship, in my opinion.
So to your comment on kind of like that, it's a great tool, I think, for how not to be a yes person and to keep your job at that time as you're forcing prioritization conversations, that open conversation. What are some of the pitfalls you've seen when someone maybe has been a yes person? Like, why shouldn't you want to be one?
I mean, you got to be one for some occasions, right? Like all of that framework makes sense, but there are things that trump that. Board meeting, fundraising, due diligence, like that's going in your top 10. There's no way to argue that, right? There are just some things you got to do. If you're making a pivot, there's just some things, an announcement of something like, outside of those things, what I find is if you just say yes to everything, one, you're not taking into account that the other person does not know what you're dealing with, and you're just assuming that they do. A lot of people that do ask, and I'm not saying this to everybody, there are just people that will railroad and just throw anything at you and not care. But majority of people, their heart's in the right place. They just don't know. So if I come to you with a bunch of things like, hey, Jeff, I need you to do this, but I don't know what's happening in your world, I'm not trying to be malicious because I just don't know.
Right.
I think that's the case. And what I think happens is two things go wrong if you're just being a yes person. One, you're going to burn out. You're just going to burn out. There's just no way around it. And when you burn out, not only does the main stuff suffer, all of it does. Two, it also creates a behavior where there aren't any boundaries. So a good example for this is I work like a beast. I work in startups. I work in growth companies. So it's just the way I'm wired. But I do set boundaries. Having a family, like you have to set boundaries. So for example, if I take a week off, let's say I go to Disney World, something like that, right? You know what I do? I set the boundary. I make sure everything's set, and then I delete Slack, I delete email, and I delete all off my phone. I cannot look at it. If it's an emergency, you can text me. If I don't believe it's an emergency text, I will not respond. That is setting an expectation. Because you know what? If I do answer 3 things on that trip, it's just gonna keep coming. And that's the pitfall of saying yes. So if you are overwhelmed with work and you have 15 priorities coming from the board, from the CEO, and then every rep asks you to do something and you don't say no, how's that going to work?
Right.
So that is the biggest pitfall. And no one's doing it maliciously, or majority of people are not doing it maliciously. But if you're not communicating it, you're just going to ask yourself to burn out, and it's just that will be bad for everybody. Long answer. I'm pretty passionate about it, in case you couldn't see.
No, I think it's good advice that even IC could start to adopt something like that framework, et cetera. So I think that's great. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, as you look back on your career, like what's the thing you're most proud of that you've ever done, right? Campaign, hire, launch, any of that?
Just a couple things. I mean, it starts first and foremost with the people. I've had a few people that have worked for me multiple times in different companies, up to 3 or 4, with one person that comes in mind. And having the impact on someone's career, seeing them move up the chain, that's probably the most rewarding thing for me. I think of the very first time I had a team, I remember bringing someone into the company I worked with at a different company, and this person really wanted to learn. And honestly, they make more than I do right now. And I couldn't be happier. And just seeing the work that went in, seeing the person transform from being an IC to managing a team at a large company to like driving strategy, and knowing that we would on marketing and strategy. I think of things like that. I think of people on my team that I've helped to move into other companies, into different roles, people that I've taken from SDR to PMM. I've taken a demand gen person, made them a PMM. I've taken an SDR, turned them into a field marketer, into an AE after. Just all of those transitions, that would be the number one thing. Number 2, which probably is going to put me in the unique situation here. Obviously, you like to take a company to scale, but I actually like the hard trip that it takes. And I always tell people, if you think the path to growth is linear, you're in the wrong business. I actually know it's like a heart attack. It's going up and down and up and down and up and down. When you do succeed, it just feels awesome. So those would be the 2 things, helping people within their careers and seeing them flourish. And then knowing that we won. It's probably, as a former athlete, I'm an underdog. When I see the team that was the underdog go and win the championship, I get a bigger rush than anything else. So seeing that you came from companies hanging at 10 million and then they're at 50, like that's an awesome feeling. Or they're at 0 and you get them to 10, 20. like that feeling and knowing that there was literally like nothing there and you were able to work through all this hard stuff and then win at the end, that would be the second.
No, I like that. Opposite side of that spectrum, what has been like the biggest mistake, toe stub, just man, like you've ever had in your career?
Do we have 2 hours? No, I'm kidding. I'm going to tell you what everyone else has told me. Have not been great at all times of marketing myself and the team internally within the company. I'm very much, have always been kind of a developer mentality. Go get it done, put your head down and just do it. But never been, I know how to communicate with execs and to be able to tell that story, but not communicating it within the company. Like, hey, this is what we did and this is how we won and this is what it means. It always came off to me incorrectly as like being arrogant and almost like bragging about it. But now I understand, and I've learned over the last few years that number one job of a marketer is, is to grow the company and to grow the brand and to grow the, the machine. But the number two is to marketing, because again, a lot of people within an organization don't understand that. So that would be the first mistake that I would think early on in the career. I just was so focused on getting from A to B, I completely left that part out. The second one that I would also say the thing with the board meetings that I talked about earlier, but the third one would be kind of doing the stuff we're doing now, just getting out there more. I'm trying to be better at it. It's hard to do when you're so heads down and like, you're putting in those 12-hour days and because you're like, wow, we're so close to getting on this thing and it just going through the moon that you don't focus on those things. And I do think there is room to do that considering what we do in terms of go to market. We need to be out there doing that because what I didn't realize is it makes the job easier. The more you're out there, the more that you're marketing the team within the company. I didn't think about that. And then B, it also makes the job easier for all the people that come after us.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think you and I grew up in marketing where we were just the brand people and the colors and the swag. And then all of a sudden we're talking pipeline and revenue. And it's just kind of like to see that evolution. And even now that's even evolving. Now it's more like the whole customer journey, being the voice of the customer, like being what you call the quote unquote chief market officer. This is definitely different from 20 years ago when it was like, oh, the marketing person, what color is the banner going to be?
Right.
Or can you make this nice and pretty? Like to see that evolution, I think all of that has to do with the things I just said. And I would say I have not done a great job at any of those early on. I don't think I'm doing a great job at it now. I think I'm doing better.
I think those are all good takeaways. If you had to summarize or kind of pick one of those, you might, what is that one piece of career advice that you would give to somebody early in their career, striving to be a CMO, marketing executive? Is it one of those? Is it something different?
No. You want to do all of those, but like you can be successful in spite of those. It's just harder. But the number one thing to be a head of marketing is you need to know how to tell a story. And whether you're looking at metrics, whether you're, talking about here's where we are, here's where we need to be. If you are not able to, whether that's in a board meeting, whether that's an exec meeting, whether that's company meeting, whether that's on stage, whether that's even with your team, if you don't know how to do that, you're going to struggle to get anything done. And people will not remember what you did. It's kind of, it's kind of a thing that I'm known for. And anyone who's worked with me will tell you this. I'm known for in board meetings, I don't look at the slides. I don't even read them. They're just there. I look wholly away from them and I just tell the story. And then I'll pull up a slide if I need to. I don't just regurgitate bullets. It's more like, all right, you have this here. Let me give you the 2-minute view of where we are. And I start telling that story because one, they remember it. Two, it's more digestible. It's just like, think about it like a sales call. I always tell people on sales call, they got to walk away remembering 2 things from this call. Anything more than that is too much because you want them to be able to go tell the other people in the company what they learned. I talked to this vendor and this is what they do. And this is how quickly it'll work or whatever it is. If you give me 20 bullets, I am not going to remember that. Same thing as a marketer. Like I am here to get us from A to B. This is the time frame I think we're going to do it. And this is kind of the overall strategy of how we're going to do it. And if you keep it at that high level, I would say anybody who wants to be head of marketing needs to be able to do that. Or you could just go list out everything you did and you just won't. It'll just be very different.
Right. No, I think that's knowing how to tell a story is such an impactful thing. I don't think there's a better way to wrap that up in our time together
Good,
today.
I hope you remember it too.
Yeah, I think everybody will. Manny, thanks so much for sharing your pints or cup of water today and perspective with us
There we go.
on
Have another
today's
sip just
marketing
for that.
hops. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers. Have a good one, man.